Would like to call to order tonight's meeting of the Ad Hoc Open Space Advisory Committee. So we'll take a roll call. Dave Brockview.
Here.
Rich Brockman.
Here.
Bob Pease.
Here.
Brandon Kibbe. Here. Bob has gratefully agreed to take some minutes for this evening's meeting, so I appreciate that, Bob. And if and when we have a full quorum of the Conservation Commission, we can call that to order. There's no real business we'll be voting on tonight besides approving the minutes, but we are here this evening to kick off an update to the Open Space and Recreation Plan. So we had done an Open Space and Recreation Plan back and started in 2008, was formally submitted and approved by the state in 2011. It's a 5-year plan, so that plan officially expired in 2016. And so we'd like to begin the process of updating the open space plan and getting a new one on record. So tonight's meeting really is an opportunity to kick that off, just let people know kind of what the process is like, what the purpose is of an open space and recreation plan, why we want to have one. Go over the 2011 open space plan a little bit, just to show you kind of what we had in place and what we accomplished under that plan as well. Talk a little bit about the things that we had done after that plan was put into place, and then talk a little bit about the process and overview. That's really sort of the purpose of this public portion tonight, is really just to kind of introduce the idea of the open space and recreation plan, and then we hope to sit down and get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts of how we want to kind of run the update process over the course of the rest of the meeting tonight. So if anybody has any questions, obviously, at any point, please stop and let us know. This is going to be a 30,000-foot view of the open space and recreation planning process. So with that, let's start. First of all, benefits of an open space and recreation plan and the planning process itself. You know, obviously, the town's open space and recreational resources are significant capital investments that the town has made over many decades. You know, we think of open space, think of Cowdrey lot as an example. We've got a large piece of open space that's sitting there, that people go for hikes and use in various ways. But it was a significant capital investment at the time, large land acquisition purchase. Some of these were acquired by gifts, some of them were acquired by acquisition, actual outlay of taxpayer dollars. So there are significant capital investments, and our park resources have significant infrastructure associated with them as well. So you think of our playing fields and our playgrounds and our ball fields and all that other stuff. It is significant capital investments and should be part of a broader planning effort. And we have master plan, we have capital plans, but the open space plan is itself a standalone plan. We'll talk about why that matters in a minute. Open space and recreation is also a really significant contributor to a quality of life in town and to our tax base in town. You know, when you have a high density of conservation land and recreational resources in your town, you think of the town of Princeton's a great example, or the town of Groton's a great example, the town of Concord is a great example, the town of Lincoln is a great example of towns that have invested a lot in their open space and recreational resources. The other thing you think of when you think of those towns is they've got some pretty nice property values as well. It's not unrelated. If you think about reading the real estate ads, if a piece of property is next to conservation land, you bet they mention it. And it's been shown that conservation can add up to 20% to property values if you own property near and adjacent to conservation land. So it's quality of life, it's also property values, and it matters, it matters to the quality of our life in Lunenburg. The other significant component to this, and why we have to have a standalone open space and recreation plan that has specific requirements that are managed by the State Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, is because a state-approved open space and recreation plan makes us eligible for significant state dollars. So there are state grants, a whole number of state grants that are available to communities that have approved open space and recreation plans. The nice thing about this revision that happened is that open space and recreation plans can now be approved for up to 7 years. And our hope is that this plan will be approved for 7 years as well, so it'll be longer standing. So the two major grant programs that the town actually has taken quite a bit of advantage of over the years, we've received actually 35 of these grants over our history. So very many of the open spaces that we have in town are a direct result of this grant program supporting our property acquisitions. So the land grant, which used to be called, it's slipping my mind right now.
Self-help.
Self-help, thank you. The land grant is for acquisitions of conservation land, the $400,000 maximum reimbursement grants at a rate of 64%. So if we spent $1 million for a piece of land for conservation, 64% of that would be reimbursed up to a maximum of $400,000. Park grants, the same thing, used to be called urban self-help, but park grants are for parkland projects. So the upgrades to Wallace Park that we recently invested in would have qualified for reimbursement under this program. So that was $62,000 we invested. We could have gotten 64% of that back, up to $100,000. So we could have gotten reimbursed for the full 64% of that had we had an updated open space and recreation plan, and we had built those upgrades into the plan. So that's why it's important to have these. There's a whole host of other grant programs too that are tied to our open space and recreation plan, conservation partnership, land and water conservation fund, drinking water supply protection grants, landscape partnerships, and others. And like I said, we've received 35 of these grants in the past, 34 of them before 1975. We went for a very long time after 1975 before receiving another grant. And actually it should be 33, not 34. We received one in 1999 for the Hunting Hills acquisition, and one just recently in 2014 for the Lane acquisition. So those, almost every one of our conservation lands in town have a tie to these grant programs. Yes, please.
Why did it slow down, the grant?
It's a great question. We actually went a fairly long time without an open space and recreation plan in place. So there was an update, there was one that was put into place finally in 1993, and then another update. I think actually our update in 2008 was the next update after 1993. We stopped asking, so we stopped going for them.
So we had no open space plan from 1993 to
1993 to 2008, yeah. Well, 2011, that was finally approved.
2011,
Yeah. So the 2011 open space plan was, like I said, we started it in 2008 and kind of went along in fits and starts. But we were able to, we did sort of a similar kickoff meeting like this at that time, and then worked with various municipal boards, got the ad hoc open space advisory committee established, which is actually established as an advisory committee to the planning board, with members from a variety of different municipal boards. So we actually have planning board Conservation Commission and members at large on the committee now. We tried at the time to get somebody from Parks involved, and we weren't unsuccessful at the time of having somebody from Parks involved. So it'd be really great for this time around to have somebody from the Parks Commission involved, given the amount of investments we could be making in our active recreational areas. So these are just sort of the highlights of the goals and objectives that came out of the planning process in 2011. Maintain rural character, that came through loud and clear in the public feedback that we got. So keeping Lunenburg's farms viable and conserving the most important wildlife habitats, drinking water resources. The map on the right of this it shows sort of the priority areas for acquisition that were defined in that planning process. The bluish color that goes through sort of the central part of town and the little circle over in the western part of town, southwestern part of town, were for scenic resources and drinking water supply protection and agriculture. And then the light green color that sort of shades the northern tier of town was defined as priority area for important wildlife habitats for acquisitions. Goal 2 was to enhance and improve our existing open space and recreation resources. So improve the community and awareness of existing open space and recreation, assure adequate access to all of our conservation areas, manage existing open space and recreation assets to maximize community benefit, and improve funding for open space and recreation needs. Goal 3 is to provide new open space and recreation resources and opportunities. So improve adult recreation programming and evaluate potential for new open space and recreation facilities. So those were the goals that were established. And I should have said before I went through those, is one of the things we really focused on in our planning effort during that time period was getting as much community feedback into the process as possible. So we had community outreach events, sort of similar to what we're doing here. We had a survey that at the time, this was I think we did it before SurveyMonkey was a thing. But we actually sent out surveys with all the property tax bills. So everybody got a copy of a survey with their property tax bills and were able to provide feedback. They were at the library, at the town clerk's office. We kind of circulated them as much as we could. We actually got pretty decent response. We got 400 and something responses, I think, for the survey, which was pretty decent. And so we took all of that community feedback, kind of built it into this plan, and came up with these goals and objectives. And I would say we were pretty successful over the course of that time period. One of the things we talked about was passing a right to farm bylaw. That's now in place. We talked about establishing an agricultural commission. It's in place now. Establishing a Chapter 61 withdrawal notice process and protocol. We have that now. Established an open space acquisition criteria. We have that as well. And what I think was probably our crown jewel of the accomplishments was that Lane property acquisition. It was clearly, when you applied the open space acquisition criteria, when you looked at our priorities that were defined under the goals and objectives, it became a no-brainer, right? And that passed unanimously. And as a result, we received nearly $270,000 in state grant to offset the cost of that acquisition. So what was a $400,000 acquisition, roughly, we spent only a fraction of that out of the town coffers. So then there's a whole host of other things that could have been objectives that, you could have hung them out as opportunities under open space and recreation. The Walls Park restoration that the community just put together, great example of that. Some of the rec facility upgrades that were part of the new high school project, the resurfacing of the turf field could qualify. All of these things are neat. This is why we want to have an open space and recreation plan that's up to date, because all of these things that we want to be making investments in are available for this type of funding. So if we can have something that says, these are our priorities, and we're just ticking off our priorities, then we'll have successful grant applications.
Do you know, or does anyone know how often the Recreation Commission meets?
I don't.
Or how, because what jumps off the page is that there's no one from Recreation here, and the missed opportunities are recreation. And it just seems like, I'd be willing to go and do some outreach, if they actually had a meeting, and go and talk to them about, you guys are missing a big opportunity here by not participating.
Yeah, and I think too, getting, Jack Rodquin's involved as well, will be important, with his involvement in managing and maintaining these, facilities. Obviously, having John here too, very helpful.
Well, then, it's my understanding he manages the rec things. Are you saying we could also do something, we could have done something for the schools?
Sure.
So maybe John Londa too.
Yep. So doing these types of, if we're resurfacing the tennis courts,
Yeah.
is a great example, right? So, and those types of projects, and I'm sure the Parks Commission is doing, long-term planning. So, we don't want to steal their thunder, we just want to make sure it gets integrated into the plan. That's the whole idea, is it's this plan that makes that funding available. So, it's critical that we get that involvement and that information into this. It's not that we want to necessarily dictate what needs to be in there. We want to just make sure we cast a broad enough net and get it into that plan so that in the future, it's there. So when we go asking.
Yeah, that was my thought.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And realistically, that's the whole idea. It's like, we want to have as broad and inclusive of a process to make sure that we don't miss any of those opportunities. So from a planning standpoint, and from a process standpoint, and last time we did this all in-house. I see no reason why we can't do it all in-house again. Some communities hire the Regional Planning Commission or a private consultant to put this stuff together. These plans are designed, and the state's guidelines for these plans are designed to be citizen planning efforts. So it doesn't have to be, wicked fancy, as they say, from where I'm from, So it can be, something really sort of grassroots driven. Yeah.
The one that you handed out here, this is from the Patrick administration.
This is the most recent copy.
Model?
Yep, 2008 was when they updated it, and before that, it hadn't been updated since the 80s.
Okay.
So yeah, this is brand new. So we can do it in-house, we can do it no expense to the town. The mapping, which is sort of the most sort of technical part of this, I happen to do that as part of my living, so I can certainly continue to do that on the town's behalf. The outreach and the input from municipal commissions, boards, employees, the general public, that's really the most important thing to do sort of early in this process and often in this process. Try to get as much public input as we can back into the process, because that speaks volumes to the state. When you can say, we had overwhelming support for XYZ objectives, and here's an opportunity for funding, and to accomplish that objective, state responds really well to that. So getting public input is really critical. And as we discussed at our meeting last month, or earlier this month, I guess it was, realistically, I think we can try to have this thing wrapped up and submitted to the state for their review and approval process to begin, hopefully before Thanksgiving. That's my objective. I'd like to have my decks cleared of this before the holidays show up, so. So that means, we'll do a bunch of the work over the course of the summer, try to get as much. I suspect we will have a hard time getting a whole lot of input, public input over the course of the summer, but if we can get all the background information geared up over the course of the summer, so that we have all the supporting data that we need, so that we're asking the right questions. And then really try to gather the public input and the feedback from the public over the course of the first part of the fall, wrap all that up into goals and objectives and an action plan, and out the door. So that's what I'm thinking. Any questions? Yeah.
So with the goals, it seemed like only goal 1B was in regards to wildlife. This is just kind of an aside as well. All of the subsequent goals were in regards to recreation. And one thing that I think is kind of important is while planning for recreation, to take the wildlife into account in order to avoid impacting that precious habitat that you're trying to conserve in the first place. Which is
So the entire northern half of the town is identified for open space acquisition for habitat. And so goal 1B, or objective 1B, specifically says wildlife habitat resources. But I would argue that actually several of those other objectives directly relate to wildlife habitat as well. 3B is a good example. Evaluate potential new open space acquisition and recreation facilities. And so certainly wildlife was habitats. When we did this originally, I didn't include all of the mapping, and all of the maps from the plan are available on our website. If you look at the habitat map in there in particular, you'll see we used biomap, we used natural heritage and endangered species data, we used areas of critical environmental concern, we used cold water fisheries, we used all kinds of habitat data to sort of drive our sort of priority area planning. And then, if you were to look at our open space acquisition criteria, that's where the rubber really meets the road. So we used sort of significant open space criteria and habitat-driven criteria. So important habitats is one of the criteria that's specifically outlined. So is it biomap core habitat? Is it natural heritage endangered species? Is it, you list the critical habitats. Is it significant in size? So is it greater than 50 acres by itself, or is it adjacent to other municipally owned or other permanently protected conservation lands? So, so we tried to build sort of a tiered kind of focus into the objective. So what and I should say too, is in the prior plan, our effort was to, you don't want to put a target on anybody's back. So we did not want to say, these are the priority acquisitions for conservation, because we didn't want people to feel like, we're targeting them in some sort of way. So we wanted to identify criteria that allows us to logically and critically evaluate.
Yeah. So what I was more getting at was after the property's been acquired. So you're talking about enhancing recreation opportunities, enhancing wildlife, or what I'm seeing about the Lane property, Bob and I have been mapping it, and the trails out there, for example, many of them are new, and many of them are within the buffer zone of the brook there, directly on top of an overhanging bank, which actually exists as turtle hibernating habitat. And so I think long-term planning as well is something that should probably be included, not just for property acquisition. It's great to acquire the properties with wildlife, but once you've got them, what are you doing with them?
That's a good point. So, how we're managing our conservation lands once they're in our portfolio. That's an excellent point. So, we should certainly make note of that as well, and include that in our process as well. Now, I know the Conservation Commission, so our conservation lands are generally held under the care and control of the Conservation Commission, so they're the ones that ultimately guide that management, so, but if we build that guidance into this document, I think that'd be smart, for sure. Any other questions? Yeah.
Is there a copy of the 2008 plan or?
Yeah, that's actually on the website as well.
Is it on the town website?
Yeah, so if you, unfortunately though,
Other plan.
it's so as an open space, as I said, the committee is set up as an ad hoc advisory committee to the planning board. So you got to go on the planning board website and then go to the open space, there's an open space link, and then you'll get to our page and the plan and the maps.
I think it's divided up into 3 sections.
Yeah,
How detailed is it? Is it?
Very.
Yeah.
yeah,
Now,
All of the surveys in there with the responses, everything.
Oh, okay.
So there, yeah, I think that's good.
yeah, the maps are there as well. The maps are,
are the current grants and the land grants, are those reimbursables?
yes.
Okay, so the town,
Right, so the way we did when we did the town meeting vote for Lane, we made the town's approval subject to being awarded the grant.
okay, so what's the order of things? You vote to buy the land?
So you have to apply before you buy, is the rule. So you can, and when we had established a process with the Lane acquisition where we were ready to buy when we applied, pretty much. We had ticked off everything on our to-do list very early in that process because we wanted to be able to go to the town and say, we know what the property's worth, we know, we had the whole thing just sort of scoped out. So we had a very good case to make on town meeting floor. And the only thing that we asked them to do is approve it subject to being awarded the grant. So then I could submit the application to the state grant-making authority and say, by the way, we already have this approved, we have assigned PNS, we already have town meeting approval, we already have our appraisal done, we already have everything done, here it is, and the only way it happens is if you guys say yes. And so, made it very hard for them to say no.
So the grants are outside of the open spaces plan consent of the town?
That's right,
Okay.
that's right, that's
Other
right.
properties do come up and the process is similar, but we don't have, there's not a lot of forethought sometimes, so a property will come up and comes to us, we apply the criteria that we have, and then it goes out to other boards to get their input, and then eventually a decision is made on whether or not it's valuable to the town, to the open space.
How long does that take? Just
Usually, no, I wouldn't say months. Usually, I think, especially with an acquisition, you're on a timeline. So-
Yeah, well, I mean, with the Lane property, I think our first meeting on that was like in October. And we got the state grant reimbursement, the awards are made in October. So in total, it took 12 months. So for us, I think we closed in December, if I remember right. So the whole thing actually took 14 months.
But for a normal acquisition, if it's land that becomes available, we have a time frame, and I want to say I'm not positive, but I think it's 120 days.
120, yeah, for a Chapter 61 withdrawal.
Chapter 61 property,
Right.
the town, so it has to move very quickly through the process.
You have a right of first refusal, so and you don't want to keep them waiting for a proposal.
And
to happen.
the nice thing about the Lane acquisition was that it wasn't a right of first refusal. We had a right of first refusal on the property because it was enrolled, but they actually came to us and negotiated a deal with us directly. So we avoided that critical timeline, and we built into that acquisition escape hatches. So we didn't want to leave the landowner on the hook for a long period of time. So we said, we would, town meeting vote was one of the things that we said, if town meeting votes it down, obviously, we're just gonna set you free. I think we had an appraisal contingency. If the appraisal doesn't work out, we're gonna set you free. Yeah, we had certain milestone dates because we didn't want to, we did our very best to treat the landowner as fairly as possible in the process while giving us the flexibility to do what we needed to do to take it through a public process for public acquisition. So it's But I think that was a great model that we can use for other acquisitions in the future. You know, it'd be, in a perfect world, we would say, okay, there's half a dozen high-priority acquisitions that we could make in town. There's not that many. And make some overtures to some folks and see what their interest is in, you know, and do it in a similar way, where we're doing it proactively rather than reactively. So,
Are
but
the grants, the state grants, are only awarded
once
once a year?
a year. Yeah. Yeah. So usually the application is due in June, July, and decisions are made October, November. So, and you've got town meeting somewhere in between. So a lot of communities make their application, wait until there's an award, and then they wait until their spring town meeting, or they hold a special town meeting after the award to get town meeting vote. We decided that was backwards. We wanted to know we had town meeting support before we submitted the application. So. Any other questions? Great.
Actually, I have one. It's kind of a tough one. But,
Okay.
let's take the example of Wallace Park. We missed an opportunity. How could we have not missed that opportunity?
You can still apply without an approved open space and recreation plan. And the state will review it. It's the same exact state agency that approves the open space recreation plan as reviews and approves the
but
grants.
basically we missed it because the time clock on the plan ran out. The plan was no longer
The plan ran out, so we could have applied, and they would have said, that's great. Before we can approve this, you have to revise and update your open space and recreation plan.
Okay.
Which, at that point, we would have been either in a full court press, trying to do it the way we want to do it, or we would be hiring Montezuma Regional Planning Commission to do it for us.
And some of it was public awareness too. You had one group kind of going off,
Doing their own
all of a
thing.
sudden that issue bubbled to the top and it had to get done.
Yeah.
So I don't think that there was really any applications for grants or any, forethought put into that.
Yeah.
Where if it's thought up beforehand, this needs to be done. Oh, that's a great thing to remember as we're putting forward our proposal and our long-term plan. Well, Wallace Park needed it, what other parks do we have to do?
Right. And we,
And then make sure that the Parks Commission is aware of it.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and I think there's a balance to be had in the plan itself, in terms of how specific you want to be and how general you want to be. You know, you want to be able to point to the plan and say, whatever it is you were trying to do, it fits. So you want to be able to, make the case for it, so that you qualify for the funding. But at the same time, the more specific it is, the better off it is, the more competitive and more compelling your application is. So it's a balancing act. When we did this plan, we started this planning process in 2008, and between 2008 and 2011, you might remember there was a little thing that happened in there called the recession. And so we made a specific conscientious decision, and if you look at the open space plan, the action plan says, because you had to identify the action item, the responsible party, and the estimated cost. And if you go down the estimated cost column, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Because we didn't want it. We just knew that, politically and everything else, that if we put forward a plan that said, we're gonna spend $1 million on this, that, and the other thing, it wouldn't have had any buy-in. Zero buy-in. So we knew at that moment, we had to really take a very hard look at, what we were proposing and how it could be, realistically implemented. And so a lot of the things, like establishing an agricultural commission is a zero-cost item. There's a right to farm bylaw is a zero-cost item. But those two things give us 5% each of additional match for agricultural preservation restriction acquisitions by state agencies, just having those two things alone. So if the State Department of Agricultural Resources is looking to protect an unprotected farm in town with an agricultural preservation restriction, they come to the town for municipal match for a portion of those funding. If you have a right to farm bylaw, minus 5% off of that match. If you have a agricultural commission, minus 5% off that match. Now you're down to 10% or whatever it is. So it's real money, real savings. So anyway, so there's sort of that historical component to how we designed that plan at the time. Any other questions? Great. So I think that wraps up the sort of presentation portion of our meeting. Obviously, everybody's welcome to hang around if they'd like. I think we're going to get into more of the meat of the agenda now and just start coming up with the plan for moving forward. Okay, great. So next item on the agenda would be to review and approve the minutes from the May 9th meeting. Anybody have any comments, questions?
I move we approve the minutes as published.
Second?
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Great, so approved.
Right, who seconded it?
I did.
I'm supposed to take minutes.
Next item is to develop a calendar of meetings and milestones for the planning process. How regular do we think we can logically get
What's your
together?
suggestion?
Well, I have an end date in mind, which is before Thanksgiving. So I would say we want to meet at least monthly.
I agree with that.
So, and with that timeline in mind, that means we would have essentially 6 meetings between now and then. So what I would like to do is I would like to kind of divide and conquer. Come up with a plan for reviewing the various sections. You know, if you look at the back end of the guidelines here, appendix, looks like a Roman numeral 1, preparing open space recreation plan update. So there's a little chart there in the back that shows which sections must be revised, which sections may need revision, and which sections don't need to be changed. You'll see pretty much everything has to probably be touched, short of the history of the community and the geology of the community. Things have otherwise changed. So, and that's actually true with there was the 2010 census that came out. So we have 2000 data, I think, in our most recent plan. Obviously new community survey information will be involved. We have a new process involved, new people involved. The regional context may have shifted a little bit depending on development patterns and trends. My guess is that things haven't changed much because of the recession. There hasn't been all that much new growth. Landscape characters, there's probably a few things that we need to tweak from our current narrative that's built into each of these sections. It's the analysis of needs, then the goals and objectives sections, actually sections 6, 7, 8, and 9 are where we have to take the public input and build that into sort of the actual plan itself. So that's the stuff that would happen later on. So we should be able to start this process, you know, the summary and the introduction, well, heck, we probably end up writing that last. So we could assign somebody to do the community setting.
If I could just clarify something.
Yeah, please.
Is this going to be a joint effort throughout the process between both boards?
That's a good question. I suppose that's as much up to the Conservation Commission as possible.
I intend on sitting in on all of these.
Yeah.
Great.
Now, do you want to have them held as joint meetings, or?
Well, we have to anyways if we get more than 4 members.
Okay,
I'm kind of surprised at the lack of input here tonight, although I think there's 2 that are on vacation.
yeah,
So Ken was lost, I don't know what happened to Todd.
yeah,
But it sounded like in talking, and Bob and Matt can probably back me up, that everybody was interested in being involved. So, I mean, you already have 2 of our members on your board with Bob and Todd.
right,
So then if I get myself, that's 3, then 1 more person.
Right.
So we would hold them concurrently.
well, and one thing we should probably have the conversation too with Adam is makeup of the board, of the advisory committee as well. Again, reaching out, I think you had mentioned that you were going to try to talk to some of the other municipal departments when we.
Actually, I already sent them a rather wordy letter.
Okay.
About attending these meetings.
Okay.
And being part of the process.
Okay.
And I can continue to just send those out.
Okay, so we should try to, I think, convene with Adam and see if we can get somebody, if he can try to work on getting somebody from Parks involved, as a sitting member of the committee.
Outreach to them, I think is very important, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, when I look at this, I see some areas, obviously, conservation input would be invaluable, you know, they really should be working on some of these sections. because
Right.
It's right in the ballpark, so.
Right, and Parks.
Yeah, parks, yeah, same thing, exactly.
You know, that's, I would say that was one of the real missing parts of our last plan,
Definitely.
is we just didn't have a whole lot of input on that. So we were doing our best to fill in the blanks.
And I think Jack may be the person to try to prod, because they are out of the DPW.
Yeah, yeah. So if we can make the contact with Jack and Adam on that and see if we can get somebody. And then the other question for Adam would be, do we want to have another sort of citizen at-large member assigned? Originally, we had 3 at-large members, part of the team. We're down to 2, Rich and myself. So, you know, so we could try to find a 3rd at-large member to help share the burden, so, from a process standpoint.
What will be the only thing to keep in mind is making sure you have enough people for a quorum. The
Right.
more members you add to the ad hoc committee, the more burdensome the quorum becomes.
Yep.
Because they get more people.
Yep. Yep. The nice thing is we're not a decision-making body. We're just an ad hoc advisory committee. So, so we can, ultimately, it's the planning board that has the decision-making authority over everything we do. So, actually having Todd, here and participating so he can provide that feedback to the planning board will be critical. So, okay. So the 3 areas we have to update here are I think in the initial section here, are the community setting section, environmental inventory analysis section, and the inventory of lands of conservation and recreation interest. So it would be great if we could assign
Which section?
3, 4, and 5.
Thank you.
It would be great if we could have a volunteer for those 3 sections to be the lead for those sections.
I can take community setting.
I can take
You
him
can
in.
do the population
I can do the
characteristics
inventory.
of 3.
So Rich, you want to do,
Inventory.
you want to do the inventory of lands of conservation and recreation interest?
Yep.
And Dave, we're gonna take community setting? And you were gonna take population within the community setting?
Yes.
That's gonna confuse me.
Well, some of these, say, may need
Oh, Rick.
revision that probably are going to have to need revision.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, honestly, if we, there's a fair amount of it that, you know,
Growth and development.
we may just want to reword it even if it's, you know,
Yeah, I think we already have a template to go from, so.
right.
Change a few dates, a few numbers.
Yep.
Update.
I mean, realistically, if you look at the environmental inventory and analysis,
There's been additions.
For conservation, what do you mean?
Additions that's been acquired.
That would be under section 5 though.
that's 5, you know,
Oh,
it's
5, I'm
like,
sorry, the inventory, I heard.
But environmental challenges, I'm sure there's
Okay,
some
okay.
more to list.
Section 5, yeah.
And certainly, you know, we were using the earlier version of biomap mapping for habitat definitions and things. So, you know, the new information that's available, more current information that's available can help drive some of that as well. So, but if we start at least with the narrative sections,
We'll be making some headway.
make some headway,
Yeah,
right?
okay.
Obviously, I'll take the lead on the mapping. So there's a whole section in here about the various maps that are needed. And so,
well, I can look at the text for section 4.
yeah, so if we start with the text for those 3 sections between now and the next meeting, we show up at the next meeting and I have draft of the maps at the next
Okay.
meeting, then we're able to,
I want to look at the text for number 4.
okay, great.
It's a little daunting. I'm not an expert in a lot of these things, so, but I'm happy to give it a shot.
Yeah, if you would, that'd be great. And again, a lot of that's may need revision, a lot of it probably hasn't changed.
Yeah.
So,
I bet Matt has some opinions on some of the stuff. And I'm sure he'd be happy to share them with me.
I will.
So, good.
Excellent.
But our next meeting would be in
In June,
June.
yeah. So why don't we spend a little bit of time talking about calendar?
Cut, okay. So you have the,
The Conservation Commission meets
First and third Wednesdays, so the 6th and the 20th.
first and third Wednesdays. Planning boards meets?
Mondays, second, last, right? Second, fourth.
Okay. Is there a date or time of day that works better for you all to get together on?
doesn't matter for
It
me.
was a good time.
This is a good time?
Yeah, 7:30,
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay.
unless, I mean, some people, I don't know.
What's the date? You zeroed in on the
Just
date.
in, no,
Just in general, is there,
Evenings?
is there, a-
Second Wednesday of the month, I have a meeting, a Hall of Fame committee.
okay.
How about the 4th Wednesday,
So the fourth Wednesday of the month might be the winner.
Yeah.
except for November?
That's right.
Yeah.
Which is fine, because it's gonna be done by then anyway. So we might choose a wrap-up date. I think we have to be flexible,
Yeah.
if we have some short-term objectives that we wanna get done coming out of a meeting, we might call a meeting in 2 weeks rather than 4 to get back together again.
Would you like to hear, or?
I don't think it matters.
Okay.
I think we'll probably also want to schedule some, additional forums to say, once we get the mapping done and we get sort of some of the basic updates done, we start having some of these, a couple of planning charrettes. And public information forums, see
Then
what
you
else we
won't
can
be
get.
here.
Yeah. And those would probably be, potentially, could be sort of off schedule, off regular schedule sort of meetings. So,
Guess the question is, do you want to wait a whole month before you meet again?
what's the calendar look like?
Well, if it's the fourth Wednesday, it's going to be the 27th.
Well, the other option would be for us to go on top of one of your other meetings, if you felt like you had the agenda space to,
Tuesday or Thursday.
or Tuesday or Thursday. So you want to start by not sticking to the agenda we just set? Right out of the gate.
We only have 6 months, 6 meetings.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have just divvied up enough to wait 4 weeks before we meet again.
Yeah,
I think most of this in 2 or 3 weeks, 2 weeks, we should be able to at least have the review,
Yeah.
yeah.
just to kind of get our feet wet.
You could always do Tuesday the 19th.
Yeah, Tuesday would be good.
Does Tuesday 19th work for you guys?
Don't know.
Don't know.
I'm often watching my grandchildren in New Hampshire on Tuesdays,
Oh,
and I don't get back till like 7:30, 8 o'clock.
okay.
So how about Thursday the 21st?
Or the 14th.
Well, it's every Tuesday. So Tuesdays would be better.
Thursday the 14th.
Oh, sorry.
Well, then school gets out in June, so, somewhere around the second week of June, the school gets out, so that all goes away.
Oh, okay. So the 19th might be bad, or definitely.
I said, I don't know, it's like.
So why don't we,
Talk to the boss.
Yeah.
why don't we start with Thursday, the 21st then?
Okay.
Thursday the 21st.
Yes,
Okay.
as a, get ourselves in order.
7:30 Ritter?
Yeah. Maybe we'll just go with Thursdays then. Instead of fourth Wednesdays. Would that work?
Not for me, I won't be showing up on Thursdays.
Not even for this one on the 21st?
Nope. Sorry.
I guess Thursday, no.
Thursday's up.
Bocce calls first.
All right, so we'll do Tuesday, we're gonna do that Tuesday, and we're gonna miss you that first one.
Thursday.
That's the third week, and then I'd have, well, maybe
Tuesday, the 19th?
Oh, no, we're going back to Tuesday the 19th?
Bob can't make any Thursday.
Oh, okay, all right.
The nights I don't have that, then I have a Board of Trustee meeting at the Woodlands.
So Tuesday, the 19th. All right, scratchy. All right. Well, that was easy.
Tuesday, the 19th.
Yep, hopefully that works. All right. Next item on, sorry, go ahead.
So, did you want to go month by month choosing the next meeting dates, or do you want to lay out?
Maybe when we have more people involved, they can determine.
Well, if we ended up with the fourth Wednesdays, if we start on Tuesday, the 19th, and then go to the fourth Wednesdays after that, we'd be looking at July 25, August 22, September 26, October 24.
It'll be in a minute.
So, so all those dates would work for me afterwards, so. And then maybe we choose a wrap-up meeting on like November 7th or something.
I'm just an advocate of choose dates, put them on people's calendars.
Yeah, if you all are comfortable with that, I'm comfortable with that.
They will appear in the minutes.
Fabulous. Looking forward to that. All right. We circulated the community survey data from the last plan. And this lists the 9 questions we asked in that survey and the total number of responses for each category. So, the question is, if we do another first of all, I assume we want to do another survey. Is that a safe assumption?
I thought that was like a requirement.
Yeah, I think it makes the most sense.
It is, just to update it.
Yep. So, the questions that we have in here, we could ask the same questions or some version of these questions. The first question is, what best describes your living situation? Whether you're a senior, couple, or living alone, family with young children, couple, no children, family with adult children, single adult living alone, single parent with children.
My only question would be why would you ask that question? What are you looking for?
I was asking myself that same question when I was looking at this question.
Well, it's an attempt to establish a demographic.
Yeah, and to understand, you know, we had very strong response asking for additional adult recreational opportunities. And so to be able to correlate that with...
If we use SurveyMonkey, you'd be able to take and figure out, you know, who were the people who wanted to, you know,
Right.
Do additional recreational facilities.
Right,
You know,
right.
You know, it's like, so.
Right. So having some demographic information attached to it. My only concern is that demographic information might require, you know, cause some people not to want to respond.
Yep, for sure.
Well, you can make that response optional.
Well, then why are you asking the question?
Because you're trying to establish a demographic, but if you've got people that are kind of going to be adverse to answering the question, they can opt out of answering the question, and then the demographic would just simply say, opt out, or some type of name for that. But there are a lot of other people that don't, like I, for example, learned in my family would never have a problem answering a demographic question. Because you're going to want to know. You have a lot of single people that want A, B, and C, seem to have in mind. You have a lot of married couples with children that want more rec.
You already filed that data.
compile that data from the census, but you can't necessarily correlate that with unless you have this information to be able to understand.
Why do we care who wants what?
Right, I would say, like age might make a difference, in certain, like perspectives, you said, some people want more adult, focus, or some people may want, I don't know, elderly recreational facilities. But I'm not sure the marital status and stuff really.
If you get 400 people, 200 of them want the adult recreation, 150 want children recreation, I don't think the demographic question is going to make a difference in our decisions. moving forward.
I don't see a need for the question.
Okay. How long have you lived in town? 10 to 40 plus years, 0 to 5 years, lifelong resident, 5 to 10 years. I don't know why they're in that order.
I don't know.
Well, who knows if they were in that order? Were they in that order in this survey?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Looks like they were in the order of responses. If
Yeah.
you look at them, they're all sorted by the number of
That's true,
responses.
that's true. I think that's an interesting question. I don't know
How relevant?
how relevant it is.
Might be
I think the only relevance is,
Sorry.
Sorry, can I make a comment?
Yeah.
I feel like by asking that, you might give the indication that you're going to give more weight to people who've been in town longer.
Right, that's-
There's definitely very strong local flavors about things in town, so it's probably not a great question to ask.
Yeah.
that's the way I was so thinking about it is,
Okay?
it's an interesting question from a statistical analysis point of view, like how many, people who have been long-time residents are still concerned, are filling out these questionnaires versus the younger crowd, or the newer crowd. But really, what,
You could ask how long our planning is staying in town.
get better.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Still.
it was interesting because, we were trying to gauge, I think part of what we were trying to gauge with that question was, how much of the town residents is sort of revolving door, they're here for a couple of years and then they move out, versus how many people are living here because this is where they live. And,
Well, that's
You know,
a reasonable question.
so, when you're thinking about open space and
Yeah.
conservation, you're talking about permanency. And, and if you're asking people to make those kinds of investments, you're asking them, to
Yeah, it's
make a
hard to get
long-term
that
investment.
For the transient population.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Does that make you feel
I would
differently?
just note that the shorter the survey, the better your response is going to be.
9 questions isn't that long,
You're right. It's not that long.
and we're down to 8 already.
Yep.
Actually, why don't we look at this another way? What questions would we ask that aren't here? It seems like we've asked about additional recreation. What are you using? How often do you use it? What would you do to preserve open space? What are we missing?
What enhancements would you like?
Yeah.
I mean, I would have check boxes, handicap accessibility, or walk accessibility, or I would have check boxes. It's not a good reason.
So which recreational areas in town do you or your family use and how often per year? We had existing sidewalks, walking, jogging tracks at schools, Marshall Park, boating, local ponds and streams, town conservation land and trails, ball fields at schools, Marshall Park, Wallace Park, playgrounds at schools, fishing, local ponds and streams, bandstand, gazebo, Maplewood Golf Course back then, Town Beach, North Leominster, Lunenburg Rod and Gun Clubs, Teen Center, basketball courts, tennis courts, other. What recreational facilities would you like to see? Bike trails, conservation areas, hiking, ski trails, nature center facility, ice skating rink, picnic areas, neighborhood park, children's play areas, recreation facilities, golf course, sports fields, other. We also had a comment section that allowed people to just sort of,
That's important too. My questions would be, how do we,
what improvements could we make to get you using what we have already and, more often? What are your concerns with the trails that we have?
Right.
Do they need maintenance? Do they need, how can we get you involved with, someone mentioned in there, a lot of people are, and I know it's because of the economy, but a lot of people are considering more staycations. So what would you do if would it be a good idea in your opinion to expand the town beach? Would that make it more or less family friendly to you? Would you use it more or less if we expanded it? If we fixed the trails, would you use them more? If we had a regular maintenance crew that, took care of things on some of these trails, would you consider that important enhancement? That's the kind of thing I would be interested in. Where do we spend the money?
If we think about the goals in the last plan, these questions hit them all? 'Cause remember, you talked about the goals, it talked about, maintain, enhance,
Yep.
have we hit all the goals?
Have we?
These questions?
Did these questions,
No.
those goals were designed based on the feedback we got from these questions.
But I'm saying, I thought those were good goals. Do these questions address all those goals? Are we soliciting information about all the goals?
Right.
In our existing plan?
Right. So I think your question's an interesting one in terms of how do we, so if the question was, how can we better utilize
What we have for recreation, our open spaces.
What enhancements would you like?
Yeah, what enhancements? Or as, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but you mentioned, what kind of, I'm not sure that's actually an appropriate question, but how would, habitat, how important is habitat to you?
So rank conservation priorities, for instance.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I'm not sure that you want the public to dictate that, but.
I don't think the Conservation Commission should be making its decisions about conservation based on populist feedback.
No, that's, I know, but you know where I'm going with that?
So we had, is it important to you to protect any of the following? Open space for conservation, drinking water supply for aquifers, important wildlife habitats, farmland, historic buildings in place, and open space for recreation. So,
And I'm assuming we're gonna check all that apply?
yeah,
I mean, if we're doing, this, if we gotta think the technology, it's like,
or we could say rank, 1, 2, 3,
I like the rank one.
right. So rank those.
which question you writing?
That's 7.
7.
Sorry, we're jumping around a little bit here.
Your minute taker's lost.
You know, take going?
We had,
You can watch it on YouTube.
that's right. So we had your interest in what enhancements would you like to see made? What are some of the options we should have under that question?
Some of the questions should just be open boxes. You can just have people put in comments. I don't know if we can,
But
if
if-
you have a whole list of,
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, they could go anywhere. I would like to see trails linked. You know what I mean? That would certainly give you some indication about prioritizing land acquisition, you know what I mean? But that's just one,
but if you at least have one or two open-ended
Yeah.
questions, somebody's bound to come up with something that
you haven't think of. Right.
I mean, we're trying to get as much info.
but if we're trying to create a list of,
Enhancements, you're talking just.
well, if we're trying to come up with some, because if we leave it open-ended, it may be difficult to categorize the information that you get back.
Yep.
Right, so if, you know, we
I think
might
you
get
have
a...
one in there already, for instance, you know, grooming, skiing, you know, I don't know whether we consider four-wheel vehicle accessibility, you know, an enhancement. But these things are, you know, a lot of people use it for that.
I consider the grooming done by the snowmobile club to be a serious enhancement.
Yeah.
Makes it possible for me to get out there
Yeah.
and cross-country ski when I couldn't otherwise.
But, you know, hiking trails, making sure that the trails are kept in good working order.
So,
Is there adequate parking?
trail maintenance marking.
Adequate parking? Is there handicap accessibility? Is there trail information and trail maps?
Trail information, trail maps, is good. I believe that the parking and the handicap is already in the order of the question as well.
By the way, we are working on trail maps
Yeah.
for all the properties.
How about
Is MRPC on?
better web and mobile information?
I think you had a question in here, how would the best way for the town to inform it? Which was kind of funny, 10 years ago, it was a local newspaper.
Yeah.
Mail, yeah. Town center signs.
Well, our website hasn't changed, so it still has the same amount of utility.
Will the trail maps be online? Yeah. Oh, nice.
There's some great,
But I mean, they'll be interactive, so you can just, on your phone.
There'll be PDFs.
It won't be.
In the future.
Yeah, you can.
Yes,
Link it in.
yeah.
yeah, because you can use things like all trails and stuff like that.
I live near the large town forest lane property. I can't tell you how many people I've met out there that are totally lost, they have no idea where they are. So I personally would like to do is put up placards at key intersections saying you are here, you know, a little map saying you are here, you know, so these lost people can get unlost on their own. For some reason, everybody from the Woodlands always ends up on Seaver Road, which is like the farthest part of the large town forest away from where they started, and they have no idea how to get back.
Trailblazers would be huge.
GPS.
We need to color code the trails and trailblazers.
We're working on it.
Sorry, anyway, where were we?
So enhancements. Trail maintenance, adequate parking, trail info and trail maps, handicap accessibility, beach parking.
Improving the beach.
It's things like that, the beach was barely even mentioned and discussed in the last plan.
There's a lot that can be done there.
Yeah,
There's been a huge increase in, you know, in housing down in that area. And I know that accessibility down there is, you know, there's no parking.
Yeah.
It's dangerous.
yeah.
So I keep bringing it up. I don't know, we'll see how far we get with it, but someday I hope to have it, you know, improved so that, you know, that everybody down that area can get to it, or across town can get to it and park safely and enjoy it and leave safely. It's, you know,
What we need is one of those lots across the street that's empty.
Say, there's land across the street for sale.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been for sale for a
I'm
couple
serious,
years
you know, if
now.
you're gonna really, because that's the only public beach.
How big is the property?
Well,
There's
that's,
several lots that are
yeah,
for sale.
but there's an acquisition opportunity,
Yeah,
so.
absolutely.
Which is why we need an open space plan.
Yeah.
It's scary my kid out of the car, my kid's out of the car, big kids, and it's just so scary getting in and out of the car.
Especially when the sun's going down and it's like,
I don't know what it is, it's scary,
Yeah.
I don't, it's a nice, we're such a treasure in the lake.
yep, for sure.
Can I ask a question? I know that Wallace Park got taken down, did any of the other playgrounds get their fixtures taken down?
And rebuilt,
They were rebuilt though.
yeah,
But well, I know Wallace Park was rebuilt,
right.
but were the other ones taken down?
Which ones you're talking about?
I thought there was a plan for Marshall Park.
I'm not sure.
I know it's still up, that's true.
Yeah.
So on the playground equipment was from Marshall Park. I'm not
It
sure,
will?
but that's what I heard.
Oh.
It's not the playground, but that would be part of Marshall Park.
Just one of the reasons we need them
Yeah, it
involved.
would be nice to get them involved, yeah.
Because if they do not, it would be Marshall Park and somewhere.
Yeah, that's a great example of where we could, really spend some time coming up with a good plan and getting some,
This park commission is much more active than the prior commission, so I would extend the invitation to the three park commissioners.
Yeah.
To get a better response.
Karen's the chair? Okay.
There are also some other opportunities that we have for, this, I have to be, what do you call that? I have to disclose that I am on a butter to one of them. It's at the West Street parcel, the Pleasant Street parcel. There's an opportunity to connect those possibly,
Yep.
and create a greenway all the way through that neighborhood and connect it to Wallace Park even, because it goes back to one of the roads in that neighborhood. I don't know if it's Natick or somewhere down that area. So those properties are already town owned. They just need to be moved into conservation. So that's something we can do for free.
Right. Exactly.
And then the maintenance or putting trails. There's also some talk in there about a stewardship program, which I'd love to learn more about, but I don't know that much about them and how to establish one.
Yeah, so we're getting into the weeds a little bit
Yeah, sure.
on some of that stuff, but those are the types of ideas I think that we want to integrate
Okay.
into this plan. So coming back to the survey, we struck question 1. It sounds like we wanted to strike question 2, how long you've lived in town. Do we care?
I don't care.
How long people lived in town? You don't care?
I don't care.
Strong feeling one way or another on that one?
I don't care.
Well, I don't think how long people, is it gonna inform some decision that we make as an open space committee? I don't think so.
It's not as though you're restricting, you're sending
Right.
the questionnaire out to, so I mean, you're gonna get feedback, and,
Right. Okay.
There's a few correlations you can make. People that have lived in town 10 to 40 years, 356. People that have never used the beach before, 307. I mean, you have a good amount of people that lived here a long time or their whole lives.
Yeah.
And you've got 432 people here that have lived here 10 years of their whole life, have never been to town beach. So,
It might be interesting to see how those numbers change, if they do change, between the last report and survey.
That's,
I think there's a correlation. Yeah, the example you just said is, that's why you have that data.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of mind blowing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
For some reason, we had question 4 on there 3 times.
Yeah.
Just put the numbers in different spots, but the same exact question 3 times.
Well, that's dumb.
Which I think is a good question.
Yeah, well, I mean,
We want people to answer it 3 times.
yeah, absolutely. So there, we have even
well,
fewer
but it's got
questions.
different,
There's
oh, I see.
different,
Oh, I see. No, I don't see.
What's that? That it's the same question 3 times?
well, but the options are different.
No.
No, they're not. They're just
ordered differently.
They're just sorted different.
Because existing sidewalks.
Fishing.
Well, I was looking
all the same
at,
numbers, so.
looking at the top one.
Yes, the same numbers. You're right.
Just ordered differently.
Boy, I survey got shorter.
Oh, you know why? Because they probably sorted on the 3 different columns.
Yep, I think that's right.
Okay, yeah.
So, are we missing anything from that question? I think of one every time I use it, which is the driving range down by Whalum. What's the name of the driving range?
Lakeview Drive.
Lakeview.
Golf course name is changed.
So it's rod and gun clubs, basketball courts, teen center, tennis courts, town beach, settlers, fishing, ball fields, boating, playgrounds at schools, walking, jogging tracks, bandstand, gazebo, town conservation land, existing sidewalks, Lakeview driving range. Should we do bicycling? Bicycling local roads? So I know,
With the, it wouldn't hurt to have that information from planning
Considering that was the number one response and what additional recreation facilities that you like.
for complete streets and all that. It'd be nice to have the information.
I would advocate that you break it into bicycling roads and bicycling trails as two entirely different sets of people.
Yeah, sure.
and we don't have snowmobiling on here.
Or quadding, four-wheel.
And plotting.
So you think you'll include four-wheel on there?
And plotting, so we should ask them to send us a picture.
No, we're only gonna put the four-wheeling in the middle of the open space, right through the bogs.
Snowmobiling. I mean, we don't allow four-wheelers on our conservation lands, right?
Yeah, I've never seen it. Never seen it.
So I don't know, I mean, do we want to ask that question if we don't? Or do we want to, ask the question just to gauge how much it's used?
I don't want to ask the question. It's,
I hate that you really should ask the question. I mean, if it comes up that 25% of the respondents want to have ATV trails, then maybe that's something that we should be looking into. Because then if you have organized ATV trails, now you're not going to have people that drive haphazardly all over the place.
Many of the
I think
grants
we've done a fair job of
that the town fire land would prohibit the use of four-wheelers, if I'm not mistaken.
No, you're correct, they do.
And so if you're asking if they want to use four-wheelers,
We're not at,
incite that kind of, they're curious if we're going to use four-wheelers. Maybe we can use four-wheelers. I don't know, it's just, regardless if they do or don't, the grants that we're trying to get from the state, I think they have prohibitions in them.
oh, absolutely, for sure, but that doesn't mean the town, to Rich's point, is if a high number of respondents come back and say that's something that they want to do, then maybe there's,
A way the town can accommodate.
that, maybe not on conservation land, but
There's other land.
there's other land that could be acquired for other,
I mean, I don't think we should just stick our heads in the sand to it because it's out there.
yeah.
In other words, put it in an area that's not a sensitive receptor, you know?
Naturally, yeah.
Exactly.
And it may spawn another group, and we work really well with the snowmobile club. So it may spawn another group interested in
Yeah.
space for use and.
Yeah, the problem is, right, is that it has, for it to be successful, if you go to anywhere in northern New England, their long-distance trails, their networks, it's very similar to the snowmobile trails.
Yeah.
And how do you put that together where you don't cross conservation land? Yeah, or private landowners. I mean, but the snowmobile model is where you get permission from private landowners to do that. So, but,
Like I said, I hate to just stick our head in the sand to it, because it is out there. And I don't think from the few responders that we get that all of a sudden everybody's gonna say, well, they're asking about it, so it's gonna go do it. I mean, if they wanna do it, they're already doing it.
They're already doing it.
Do we ask the questions somewhere else in the survey?
Chase them.
You know, do we ask it as our ATVs?
If we're looking for recreational opportunities, you know, ATVs, not dirt bikes, but the pedal bikes that you ride through the woods.
Mountain biking.
Hiking.
There's also
Hiking.
something else I just noticed that wasn't on here, which was big when I
Rare species collection.
when I first moved to town, was horseback riding. No horseback riding at all.
Oh, yeah,
And, that used to be big.
still is.
Yeah.
I'm sure in other areas, yeah, there's still a few, but down my area, it's sort of dried up a little.
Horseback riding.
Ladies that did it all the time, both their horses get old. I tried to one of them, I put down the other one, just as grazing. Oh, yeah. Back there.
Okay. Anything else we should have on there?
I'll just point out what seems to be a typographic error in 8 and 9. At least to me it is to preserve open space in the, would you, I guess, I assume it didn't go out on the survey
I don't think so, yeah, in the town.
in the town or in Lunenburg.
All right, then I think what I'll do is I'll rejigger this, or does somebody want to take that as an action item? To rejigger the
The minute taker would love it if you would rejigger the questions.
questions? But I don't want to take this out of somebody else's bailiwick if they'd like to do it while I'm doing maps.
I hear you. I mean, I'm assuming we're gonna use SurveyMonkey for this.
I think, so that's a separate question. I think we should use SurveyMonkey, but I think we'll be missing a whole segment of our population if we don't put it out in other manners.
Yeah.
I mean, probably one of the reasons we got such a high density of lifelong and long-term residents in responses is because it went out with the tax bills.
Yeah. When did the tax bill go out?
Because
I think they go out in July, don't they?
A lot of times-
Paid in August 1st.
don't they go out biannually?
Yeah, that would go out, I thought in June for the first and second payment, which is what, July or August and November.
So we'd have to get something together,
August 1st.
so we'd have to get something together yesterday to get it in the tax bill.
You want to just jigger it and email it out? Maybe just comment on it.
Is that deliberation?
No, as long as it just comes back to you, it's not deliberation. You only cannot be circulated.
Okay.
I mean, I'm fine with your final decision. Did a good job coming up with the first one.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll do that then. I'll recirculate. If anybody has any additional questions, comments, get it back. Who should we talk to? Will somebody take the point then on talking with the tax collector about getting what the process is for us to get a one-pager
Yeah, I can do that. He's got weird hours though.
Yeah, there's always somebody else.
Yeah, I just talked to where it's at. Yeah.
Okay.
So we want to know how to get it inserted?
Yep. Get a one-pager inserted, and how many copies we'd have to produce.
Okay.
And then if we did that for the paper copy and then still put it out from the SurveyMonkey,
Yep.
And you can also list the Survey Monkey.
Right, on the paper.
Yeah, and then we can use, the selectmen they can broadcast it at their meeting, put it on the.
Put it on the-
Facebook, website, yeah.
Yeah, and if we have a PDF version of it, if somebody wanted to download it and print it off and send it in,
Yeah.
How does Survey Monkey work? I mean, could somebody vote more than once?
You bet your bippy. Unless you take and you have the person's email address, if you take and you send SurveyMonkey out to, people for you to have a list of email addresses, and then you can send them a unique link, and then each person could only, respond once.
There's no unique ID on any of them.
But if you don't have that, I don't know how you can take and you can give everybody a unique ID. I did a lot with SurveyMonkey. My last job, I was technology director for the Manchester Public Schools in Connecticut. And, at least, and I haven't touched it in 3 years, because I've been retired for 3 years. But back then, you needed some way to send everybody, a unique code.
Yeah. You need to be able to identify them.
I thought you could set it so it would only allow one response per.
And you can do that, so one response per, IP address.
Oh, okay.
Kind of thing, but that has problems.
the number of people that are gonna try
yeah, that's not
to
bad for
stuff
us.
the ballot box here, I'm really not worried about it.
Yeah, I mean, because like paper copies, people can submit more than one paper copy, it's like,
Right.
who we
And,
kidding?
and this is far from scientific.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm taking statistics for managers right now, pursuing my MBA, and there's nothing about this that's remotely scientifically accurate. So, but gives us at least
yeah.
some data,
Yeah.
some information. So, and mostly we want to give people a vehicle for providing some sort of feedback to the process, so. Yeah, so if we have SurveyMonkey, we have PDF available on website, we have hard copy in all of our tax bills, we put copies at the library, town clerk's office, and
Eagle House?
Eagle House. We link to the web PDF or the SurveyMonkey on the various social media sites.
Just because there's nobody here from the AgCom, should we maybe add the farmer's market?
Oh, that's a great idea. To the recreational areas?
What areas have you used?
That's a great idea. Excellent.
And that might be another group that we want to get input from.
Yeah.
Matt said that he was going to
Okay.
try to stay
Yeah,
involved.
Matt's planning on being here, I don't know what happened.
To pick your own? Or do you frequent any of the local farms for produce? Glen Lane says to pick your own, so it's just a mill. I don't think we have any pick your own apples. I don't think Flat Hill lets you pick your own apples up there, do they, the peaches?
I don't think they do pick your own.
Just try to get some, how often do you do business at the local farms, produce stands?
I don't know if we want to add the corn maze to recreation opportunities.
Oh, at Lonnie's?
It's a good question. I know there's been, I don't know who's been attending the commerce discussions, but there's been a lot of talk about opening up, private land to some kind of concessions, or events. I don't know if we want to include that kind of question in there or not, It's also farm-to-table stuff, that's, I don't know if you consider that recreation, you know what I mean? A local farm that has a, brew pub and, I want, the cow, kill that cow for me, feed me a steak.
I want that.
Get the taco on the table.
Hey, this This YouTube video is a family video. Let's stick to our audience.
At least what's in town.
But is that something that we want to ask about, or is that something strictly for commerce to discuss? I'm not sure how it would translate to anything that we would do as an open space, you know what I mean? Or, recreation.
It's, it's like, to me, it's more like entertainment
Yeah.
than recreation,
Yeah.
and we should leave it alone.
Gastropubs,
Yeah.
okay. All right, so I will rejigger this and try to capture all of that information. The why do we live in Lunenburg question, we want to keep that, I presume.
Yep.
That's one of those things.
Are there any recreation facilities listed in which ones would you like to see that we should,
Well, I think that's where, Rich's suggestion of an open question.
that's.
Open-ended, yeah.
So the other question there is other, colon, please specify.
Yeah.
One of those jobbies. Yep, okay. All right. That's more than enough on that topic. I think we already handled D. Review prior plan, discuss which sections need to be reviewed, edited. We're gonna start with that, what we have laid out. The mapping requirements really are unchanged since the last plan, so the most important thing is updating the inventory maps. And the habitat maps, obviously, we need to change for the most updated habitat information that we have. Other than that, it should be, the mapping should be pretty straightforward, so, yeah.
So the priority habitat, this is just, again, related to wildlife, of course. Those grants that you can go out for, they take into account priority habitat to some degree, I assume. If you find a rare species that has not yet been mapped for priority habitat, because it's updated, every 5 to 7 years, something like that,
No, the maps get instantaneously updated on the GIS database.
No, they don't. They don't. So if you submit a new record for a rare species, it's not instantaneous, depending on what species it is.
Yeah, but it doesn't go from
Heritage
5 to
is-
7 year. Heritage does do overlay updates yearly.
You haven't been doing it. The most recent update for the Natural Heritage Priority Habitat was last year.
Yeah.
They hadn't done it since I think like 2011 or so. And so over that time period, many of those priority habitat areas changed. And that being said, if there are areas in town where rare species do occur, Natural Heritage doesn't have the time to go out looking for them. If there's local knowledge of some sort of where these locations are, if you have evidence of something occurring there, will these grants take into account that?
Absolutely.
It's not-
Absolutely, because if you submitted that record to Natural Heritage, I mean, if we knew that, and I'm writing that grant, I'm going to Natural Heritage and asking them for a letter of support for my grant application, and so that they can say, yes, we have a verified record of XYZ species on that property.
And if they will update, they will designate it a habitat area, even if they don't update the state maps.
Right.
They will give you a designation form, which they copy the town.
Yeah.
So the town would already have a designation form saying, hey, the map hasn't been updated yet, here's the endangered species designation form.
Yeah,
But it's not endangered, it's special concern or threatened.
It still gets a designation.
It's a recent finding, the priority habitat has to be in effect for it to be under regulation. So if it's found, like say last week or 2 weeks ago, and someone's going forward with putting in development, well, that might not necessarily have the same kind of implications upon them if they've already gone through the process of an NOI or an RDA, that they're not going to be restrictive as much as they could be retrogressively.
If it's found subsequent to the RDA or the NOI.
Exactly. Yeah,
But if it's found prior, and Natural Heritage accepts it, then yeah, it has to meet those standards.
Okay.
Has to.
I think that, I was just with someone from Heritage today, asking a question about this. I'm gonna touch base with them again, and I'll get back to you. But in regards to that, I think there are locations in town that Heritage doesn't know about, which could be of interest. So I'll let you know if okay.
You may want to let me know.
Okay.
He's the right one to let know.
You don't want to go on top site.
That doesn't make me an expert.
No, but it does make him a better typist than me.
But if you have, I mean, from a regulatory standpoint, you know, it's like you're saying.
Well, under local regulation, evidence of potential rare species habitat or vernal pool is automatically covered under wetlands bylaw, but that doesn't do us any good on state grants.
Right.
That's why it would have to get a natural heritage designation.
Right.
Like vernal pools, for example, the vernal pool maps aren't updated as regularly, but if you get a vernal pool designation, same thing, you get a form.
Yeah.
You turn it in.
I mean, realistically, the number of open space acquisitions that we're gonna be doing in this next 7-year time period is likely to be really, really, really small.
That's too bad.
It's also the reality of it.
Yeah, it's understandable.
Yeah, so, I mean, you know, and, you know, when we did the Lane acquisition, that was the first municipal acquisition of open space for a very long time. And,
For this area, that was a big chunk.
you know, that was a big chunk, and, you know, we took a really kind of targeted, we left out of that acquisition a big piece of property, because we had to be able to make the case that we were protecting only the most important portions of it. So, my expectation is that our fellow residents and taxpayers are going to have that same expectation anytime we bring these types of things forward. So we have to be really critical about how we pursue these things. So if and when that case comes up, I mean, obviously we'll want to take into account all information that we have available, whether it's public or...
Because you gotta realize, if we buy a piece of land that's sensitive, and we know it's sensitive, it's all these attributes that you're talking about, which I know there's a lot of them out there. We're both singing the same tune in different languages, but we're singing the same tune. If I put in for a lands grant for $1 million, because that's what the appraisals came out at, we do an offer, we do a purchase and sale, yada, yada, yada. I gotta be able to go to the townspeople and justify, because they gotta front that $1 million in order to get the 400,000 back. So there's still 600,000 of taxpayer money that's gonna be gone. So if they're gonna spend $600,000, I want them to know that that $600,000 actually, in keeping that open space, is gonna save them 1.2 million in the future.
Yeah.
You know, just even if it's just intrinsically, you know? So it's why Brandon was saying it's gonna be a while before we go through big pieces of land, because we just did a major purchase, so.
Mr. Chairman, where are we on the agenda?
C and F, or, we're in that little practice between E and F.
Yeah. So, let's move to F.
Thank you.
I think we should go back to A and start
I'm picking up
all
what you're
over.
putting down. Discuss the assessments of existing infrastructure, review list from prior plan. Okay, so my interest in F is, and this is one thing we didn't do in the last plan that I'd like to see done in this plan, and I don't think, we don't have to necessarily do this tonight, is go through the list of infrastructure, and everybody takes 2 or 3. And they go out with their camera, and they take a picture of the sign, and they take a picture, you know, and we go out and we do an assessment of each of these facilities. And go for a walk, go look at what's there, you know, I'd love to have an inventory of all the, you know, all the recreation facility, infrastructure that's available at Wallace Park now. There's a merry-go-round, there's a jungle gym, there's basketball courts, there's, you know, actually have an inventory of what we have for each of those facilities, which is more than we accomplished in the last plan. So we had a list of properties, but we didn't have a really detailed inventory of all the infrastructure that's at each of those.
And so I would advocate that we do our utmost best to get a representative from Recreation here by our June 19th meeting.
I don't think you'll have much of a problem with that, because during the course of the meeting, and she may still be watching. Karen Menard asked me for Brandon's email address
great.
through my email. That's why you may have seen me poking on my phone. I was answering her.
Terrific.
So that, they can participate. 'Cause
Absolutely.
I don't think this committee should be doing that,
And it's not necessarily, we're not doing that in a vacuum. I think we
Right.
want to be doing
Yeah.
that, same thing for
In concert,
for the
yeah.
open spaces, to
Yeah.
say, at Cowdrey, we have designated hiking trails, we have a snowmobile trail, we have parking for X number of vehicles, we have an informational kiosk, we have, just get all of the information together so that when we put together those trail maps,
Yeah.
we can also say, there's a little narrative on the back of that trail map that says, this is what's available.
Hey, the ADA assessment portion,
I was gonna-
I can help out with that.
Awesome.
I don't know if you know this, but for the past, 8 years, I've been the ADA coordinator for the town of Sterling.
Okay.
So I'm familiar with the Architectural Access Board requirements, even for open space.
Do we have an ADA coordinator?
Probably the building inspector or the town administrator.
So, your first task is to figure that out. And then, you're hired.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
So that'd be fabulous. So, that's part of one of the things we have to, do as well.
I mean, one of the things I've got
ADA.
experience in is doing the self-evals.
So maybe for the next meeting, may the minutes show that maybe you can walk us through that process as one of the, agenda items for the next meeting.
Absolutely, yeah, not a problem.
And
More
then,
happy
so
to.
at the next meeting, we can talk more about F here and make some assignments and go over what the ADA self-assessment forms look like. And so we can cross all of that stuff off the list early in the process.
Just want to throw one more thing out there. With all of these people living there, there's all these new developments going on in town, especially in my area. Community gardening might want to be included in our list.
Good thought. Good thought.
So what additional recreation facilities? Community gardens?
I was gonna say up in Leominster over at the Shoal and Apple Orchard.
Yeah.
Right across from it, they have a very large community garden that's run very well and it's very successful. Very busy.
Yeah.
Great
Yes,
idea.
you do them here and in Maine, I've seen quite a few.
Yeah.
I mean, if you wanted something close by that's actually been running for a while.
Yeah, I'll check it out. Show them.
Yep.
It's funny, that's such an urban idea
I know.
for our town, like that's gonna it's gonna be very neighborhood dependent.
Well, there are a lot, yes, it will be.
Yeah.
But there are also a lot of newcomers in town that are coming out of urban.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
Urban lifestyle.
For sure.
Who are looking for some things like that.
For sure. Yeah. Good. We covered a lot of ground. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you for chairing the meeting.
Thank you very much.
Anything else you guys want to cover?
I can be adjourned.
I'll accept a motion. Motion made?
That was a motion.
That was?
Yes.
And seconded? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You just allowed me to fulfill my promise to my wife to be